The morning of July 25, 1944 broke gray and cold over the hedgerows of Normandy. Inside a factory-fresh Panther tank of the 113th Panzer Brigade, Oberstfreiter Klaus Werner settled into the gunner's seat and felt the confidence that came with sitting behind 60 mm of frontal armor and a high-velocity 75 mm gun that could kill any Allied tank at 2,000 meters. His tank was one of dozens assembled for Operation Cobra's counterattack, part of a desperate German attempt to contain the American breakout. The Americans had been in France for 7 weeks. Werner had been told their Shermans were poorly armed, prone to fire, and crewed by soldiers who had no stomach for real tank warfare. He had been told the Americans relied on numbers rather than quality, that 5 of their tanks would die trying to kill one Panther. He had been told many things. By noon that day, he would learn that intelligence reports could be fatally wrong. Less than 2 kilometers away, Technical Sergeant Francis Baker sat in the commander's cupola of a brand new Sherman tank that had arrived in France just 3 days earlier. His tank looked different from the 75 mm Shermans that had landed on D-Day. The gun barrel was longer, nearly 5 meters of rifled steel that protruded from a new T-23 turret. The muzzle brake at the end gave it an aggressive, purposeful look. This was an M401 with the 76 mm M101 gun, fresh from depots in Britain where it had sat unwanted since April. American armored division commanders had rejected these tanks before the invasion, preferring the familiar 75 mm gun with its superior high-explosive rounds for infantry support. Tank versus tank combat was supposed to be rare. Panthers and Tigers were supposed to be uncommon. That illusion had died in the hedgerows of June and July, where German tanks destroyed Shermans at ranges the 75 couldn't match. Now, finally, the 76 mm Shermans were here. 102 of them had been rushed to Operation Cobra after frantic requests from the front. The second day of the offensive would be their combat debut. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Baker's crew had trained on the 76 only briefly. The gun felt different, balanced differently. It fired the same caliber ammunition as the 3-inch gun on the M10 tank destroyer, but used different propellant casings. The armor-piercing rounds could punch through 125 mm of unsloped steel at 100 meters, 106 mm at 1,000 meters. Against a Panther's frontal armor, which measured 100 mm at a severe angle, the math was uncertain. Against its side armor, just 40 mm, the math was simple. The 76 would go through like paper. Everything depended on position, angle, and who saw whom first. To understand what was about to happen in the fields near St. Gilles and Marigny, you have to understand what both sides believed in July 1944. The Americans believed they had been fighting with inadequate weapons. Since Normandy's invasion, Sherman crews had encountered Panthers and Tiger tanks that shrugged off 75 mm rounds from the front. American doctrine treated tanks primarily as infantry support, not as tank killers. That role belonged to the tank destroyer battalions with their lightly armored, open-topped vehicles mounting 3-inch or 90 mm guns. But tank destroyers couldn't be everywhere. When Shermans met Panthers in the close confines of Bocage country, the engagements were brutal and one-sided. Panthers could kill Shermans from distances where return fire was ineffective. Crews learned to aim for weak points, the gun mantlet, the lower hull, the sides. They learned to maneuver, to use speed and agility, to gang up 4 or 5 tanks against one German vehicle and attack from multiple angles simultaneously. They learned, but men died learning. The Germans believed they possessed technological superiority that numbers alone couldn't overcome. The Panther was designed after encountering the Soviet T-34 in 1941, engineered specifically to dominate medium tanks in long-range engagements. Its sloped armor was revolutionary, increasing effective thickness without adding weight. Its gun was accurate, powerful, and mounted in a turret that could traverse smoothly. German tankers knew Panthers had problems. The transmission was fragile. The engine caught fire with alarming regularity. Final drives failed after remarkably few kilometers. But when the Panther worked, and when it had fuel, and when it had ammunition, it was the finest medium tank on any battlefield. German crews believed this. They had to believe it. By July 1944, Germany was losing the production war catastrophically. The Reich built 6,000 Panthers during the entire war. America built over 15,000 75mm Shermans alone, with thousands more variants. Qualitative superiority wasn't a luxury for German tank crews. It was necessary for survival. The 76mm gun program had existed since 1942 but had stumbled through indecision, logistical concerns, and institutional conservatism. Ordnance Department engineers knew the 75 was inadequate against heavily armored targets. They developed the 76 by adapting a 3-inch anti-aircraft gun, shortening it, fitting it into Sherman turrets. Early prototypes cramped the turret crew. The solution came from the cancelled T-23 medium tank program, whose larger turret fit perfectly onto the Sherman's turret ring. By January 1944, the M401 with 76mm gun was in production. By April, 130 were in Britain. But Army commanders in England preparing for Overlord didn't want them. Major General Hugh Gaffey of the 2nd Armored Division argued against deploying untested tanks just before the invasion. Crews weren't trained on the new gun. Ammunition supply would be complicated. The 75 was doing fine, they said. It had handled Tigers in Tunisia, Panthers in Italy. Why change now? So the 76mm Shermans sat in depots while 75mm tanks rolled onto landing craft for D-Day. Reality arrived with German shells. In Normandy's hedgerows, where engagement ranges dropped to 300 meters or less, the 75 performed adequately. But in open ground near Caen, British Shermans discovered that Panthers could kill at 2,000 meters with impunity. After 2 weeks of fighting, reports flooded back to headquarters. The 75mm gun was inadequate. American tankers were dying because they couldn't hurt Panthers from the front. On July 2, General Dwight Eisenhower relayed complaints to Ordnance. On July 12, a board convened to test American weapons against captured Panthers. The results were sobering. No standard American tank gun could penetrate a Panther's frontal armor reliably. The 3-inch gun on the M10 tank destroyer could penetrate the gun mantlet at 200 yards. Nothing else could. Suddenly, those 130 unwanted 76mm Shermans in Britain became desperately needed. General Omar Bradley ordered them shipped to France immediately for Operation Cobra. 52 went to 2nd Armored Division, 52 to 3rd Armored Division, the remainder to independent tank battalions. They arrived with barely any time for crew familiarization. Some units received their first 76mm Shermans on July 17 and were expected to attack on July 25. Commanders gathered their tank crews and told them what the new gun could do. Could kill Panthers from the side. Could penetrate Panzer IVs reliably. Against Stoogie assault guns, it was devastating. Against dug-in anti-tank guns and fortified positions, it was less effective than the 75's high-explosive round, but it would have to do. The trade-off was clear. Infantry support capability for anti-tank capability. Close-range devastation for long-range precision. The old Sherman for the new war. Technical Sergeant Baker studied his new tank in the assembly area near Sir Lou Chemin du Grill. The cast hull was standard M401, powered by the Continental R975 radial engine. The vertical volute spring suspension was standard, narrow tracks that dug into Norman mud. But that turret, that gun, changed everything. The 76's extra length gave it reach. The muzzle brake reduced recoil, letting the gun settle faster between shots. Inside, the turret felt more spacious than the old small-hatch Shermans. The loader had room to move. The commander could see better. Everything about this tank said someone had finally listened to crews who'd been asking for more firepower since North Africa. Whether it was enough remained to be seen. Operation Cobra's preliminary bombardment began at 0938 on July 25 with 1,500 heavy bombers dropping fragmentation bombs on German positions south of the Purrier-St. Lo road. The bombing was supposed to paralyze German defenses, destroy communications, crater roads. It accomplished all of this, and it also killed 111 American soldiers, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the European theater. The fratricide was catastrophic, but the offensive continued. At 1400 hours, American tanks rolled forward through the destruction. Baker's tank moved with B Company, 37th Tank Battalion, 2nd Armored Division. Their objective was the town of St. Gilles, 6 kilometers south. Intelligence reported scattered German resistance, some anti-tank guns, possibly tanks. The advance began cautiously, feeling through smoke and dust. Hedgerows channeled movement onto roads. Visibility was terrible. Every blind corner could hide a Panther or an 88mm anti-tank gun. Sherman crews had learned to spot the signs. Fresh track marks in mud, crushed vegetation, the glint of optics in hedges. Baker scanned constantly through his periscopes, calling positions to his gunner and driver, coordinating with other tanks in the column. This was how you survived, staying alert, never assuming safety. The German counterattack developed around mid-morning near Marigny. Elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade, which had been held in reserve, received orders to contain the American breakthrough. The brigade was newly formed, equipped with brand new Panthers fresh from factories. Crews had minimal training, some having driven their tanks less than 100 kilometers before seeing combat. But they had confidence born of technical superiority. Each Panther mounted a 75mm KWK 42 L70 gun capable of penetrating 165mm of armor at 1,000 meters. Each Panther's frontal armor was effectively 180mm thick when sloped. Against Sherman tanks mounting 75mm guns that couldn't penetrate from the front beyond 500 meters, the math favored Germany. Oberstfreiter Werner's Panther was part of a company advancing north toward American positions. The fog was beginning to lift. Through his optics, Werner could see hedgerows, fields, the hazy outline of a village. Somewhere ahead were the Americans. His commander, a veteran of the Russian front, had warned the crew not to underestimate enemy numbers. Russians attacked in waves, he said. Americans do the same. Kill one tank, 2 more appear. But individually, he said, their tanks are inferior. Engage at range. Use your gun's superiority. Never let them close. Never expose the side armor. Panthers win when they dictate range and angle. The encounter happened suddenly, as tank battles usually did. B Company's lead platoon rounded a hedgerow and spotted German tanks 800 meters across an open field. The Panthers were hull down behind a slight rise, turrets visible, barrels traversing. In a 75mm Sherman, the tactical response would be immediate withdrawal, call for tank destroyers, wait for artillery. But Baker's tank had the 76. His gunner, Corporal Michael Chun, laid the gun on the nearest Panther, range estimated at 750 meters. Target partially exposed, turret and upper hull visible. Chun fired. The 76mm armor-piercing round left the muzzle at 2,600 feet per second, crossing 750 meters in about a second and a half. It struck the Panther's turret side at an angle, penetrated, and detonated inside. The Panther's turret crew died instantly. Smoke poured from the hatches. Werner, in the Panther next to the one that had just exploded, experienced a moment of pure incomprehension. American Sherman tanks didn't do that. They didn't kill Panthers at 700 meters with a single shot to the turret. That wasn't possible. His commander was screaming into the intercom, ordering the driver to reverse, ordering Werner to traverse left, acquire target, fire. But Werner couldn't find the target through the smoke. Then a second American round hit their Panther, striking the gun mantlet, penetrating into the fighting compartment. Werner felt the impact as a physical blow, a sensation of heat and overpressure. The tank filled with smoke. Someone was screaming. The driver reversed wildly, trying to get behind the hedgerow. Werner couldn't breathe. His hands found the hatch lever. He pulled himself out into daylight, dropped off the tank, ran. The engagement at the hedgerow lasted perhaps 3 minutes. 2 Panthers destroyed, 1 damaged and withdrawing. No American tanks lost. Captain Jimmy Leach, commanding B Company, later described the action with professional satisfaction. The 76 worked, he said. It worked exactly as promised. His crews hit what they aimed at. The penetrations were clean. The kills were quick. For the first time since Normandy began, American tank crews felt they had a fighting chance against German armor. Not dominance, not superiority, but parity. A chance. But the 76 had limits that would become apparent in the following months. Against Panther frontal armor, the standard M62 armor-piercing round was ineffective beyond 500 meters. The sloped 100mm plate at 55 degrees created an effective thickness the 76 couldn't reliably defeat. The gun mantlet was vulnerable, but hitting a target less than a meter across at combat ranges required extraordinary skill or luck. The Tiger's frontal armor, 100mm vertical, was equally resistant. The 76 gave Sherman crews the ability to kill German heavy tanks from the side or rear. From the front, they still needed superior tactics, positioning, and often numerical advantage. The arrival of tungsten-cored HVAP rounds in August 1944 improved penetration significantly, but supplies remained limited. By February 1945, the average 76mm tank had received 5 HVAP rounds total, 1 per month. Crews hoarded them for encounters with Panthers and Tigers. General George Patton's Third Army initially refused 76mm Shermans. Patton had confidence in aggressive maneuver and speed. His units would bypass German armor, cut supply lines, force retreats through operational maneuver rather than tactical firepower. The 75mm gun was adequate for this mission. Then came September 19, 1944, and the Battle of Héricourt. The town of Héricourt sat in Lorraine, eastern France, near the Moselle River. Patton's Third Army had advanced rapidly across France, capturing Nancy and establishing bridgeheads over the Moselle. The German 5th Panzer Army received orders to counterattack, recapture Luneville, destroy the American bridgehead. The German force assembled 262 tanks and assault guns, including 107 Panthers, 75 Panzer IVs, and 80 self-propelled guns. Against them stood Combat Command A of the 4th Armored Division, Major General John Wood's elite unit with roughly 100 tanks, mostly 75mm Shermans with some 76mm variants, plus M18 Hellcat tank destroyers. On paper, the Germans had overwhelming superiority. Panthers outgunned and out-armored Shermans. German crews expected victory. They advanced with confidence born of 2 years watching Allied tanks burn. What they encountered instead was a masterclass in defensive tactics, combined arms coordination, and the lethal potential of well-positioned American armor supported by artillery and air power. The morning of September 19th broke with thick fog blanketing the countryside around Héricourt. German Panthers from the 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades advanced blindly, lacking reconnaissance units, unable to coordinate properly. The Germans advanced in company-sized elements, uncoordinated, each unit attacking independently. Combat Command A's disposition was defensive, thin outpost line of armored infantry and engineers backed by tanks, tank destroyers, and artillery positioned on favorable terrain. At 0800 hours, German tanks penetrated American outposts. 2 tank destroyer platoons and a medium tank company engaged them in running fights that reached Combat Command A's headquarters, where M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers engaged Panthers with direct fire at close range. Poor tactical deployment exposed German tanks' weaker side armor to Shermans using fog as cover. American tanks flanked the advancing Panthers and destroyed them systematically. At a ridge 500 yards from the command post, C Company, 37th Tank Battalion engaged German armor with their 75mm guns, knocking out several vehicles. At noon, 14 Panthers, probably from the 111th Panzer Brigade, approached headquarters directly. A platoon of M18 Hellcat tank destroyers sheltering the headquarters destroyed 8 Panthers in quick succession. The remaining tanks withdrew rapidly. Captain Jimmy Leach's B Company, also of the 37th Tank Battalion, executed a textbook flanking maneuver. While a company engaged Panthers frontally near Héricourt, Leach's company crept along a side road, using hedges and ridges for concealment. When they emerged, they were perpendicular to the Panthers' line of advance, facing side armor. Leach ordered his platoons forward, all guns firing. First Lieutenant Merwin Marston's 3rd Platoon divided into 2 sections, one on the road, one north in support position. They spotted 2, then 3, then more Panthers. Staff Sergeant James Barry's 2nd Platoon moved into blocking position south of the Héricourt-Tréchicourt Road and opened fire. The Panthers, suddenly under attack from an unexpected direction, abandoned their positions and fled. Leach watched them retreat over a hill at high speed, turrets reversed, running for survival. By day's end on September 19th, 43 German tanks lay destroyed around Ericourt, mostly factory-new Panthers. American losses: 3 tank destroyers, 5 M4 tanks. 6 Americans killed, 13 wounded. The 4th Armored Division had decisively defeated a numerically superior German armored force. The 76mm Sherman had proven itself in a major engagement. But equally important was the tactical skill of American crews, the effectiveness of combined arms coordination, and the devastating impact of P-47 Thunderbolts when the fog lifted and aircraft could attack. The battle continued for 10 days. From September 20th through September 29th, 5th Panzer Army through repeated attacks against the Ericourt position. On September 20th, Major Bazooka Charlie Carpenter attacked Panthers with his Piper L-4 Cub observation aircraft armed with bazookas, diving through ground fire to strike tanks from above. Throughout the period, American tank crews developed and refined tactics for killing Panthers. The key was denying the Germans the ability to engage at range. Force them to close, use terrain to break line of sight, then hit the sides when they exposed themselves maneuvering. Use artillery and air power to suppress German movement. Coordinate multiple tanks against single targets. The 76mm gun gave crews the tool to kill when they achieved favorable positions. Tactical competence gave them those positions. The Battle of Ericourt demonstrated that technology alone didn't determine battlefield outcomes. German Panthers possessed superior armor and firepower on paper, yet American forces destroyed over 280 German tanks and assault guns during the 10-day battle while losing only 25 Shermans. The disparity wasn't explained by the 76mm gun alone. Many American tanks still mounted 75s. Instead, victory came from combined arms integration, superior tactical flexibility, overwhelming artillery support, and air superiority that German forces couldn't match. By October 1944, American armored divisions had refined their doctrine for engaging German heavy armor. Tank platoons operated in coordination with tank destroyers and artillery forward observers. Reconnaissance units identified German positions before main forces engaged. Air liaison officers called in fighter bombers against targets beyond tank gun range. Infantry cleared hedgerows and buildings that could hide Panzerfaust teams. This integrated approach transformed the Sherman from a vulnerable target into part of a lethal system. The 76mm gun continued spreading through American armored units. By December 1944, roughly half of all Shermans in Europe mounted the 76. Production priorities shifted. New tanks rolling from factories increasingly carried the longer gun. Crews appreciated the increased capability, though they understood the weapon's limitations. Against King Tigers with their 150mm frontal armor, even the 76 was inadequate from the front. Against dug-in infantry, tankers missed the 75's superior high-explosive round. The Ardennes Offensive in December 1944 tested American armor doctrine under the worst possible conditions. German forces achieved tactical surprise, attacking through difficult terrain in winter weather that grounded Allied aircraft. Panthers and Tigers operated in their ideal environment. Defensive positions, long engagement ranges, restricted roads that channeled Allied movement. Yet even here, American forces adapted. When German armor couldn't be defeated frontally, American units bypassed strongpoints, called in artillery, and waited for air support when weather cleared. The 76mm Sherman participated in countless small engagements where positioning and crew skill determined outcomes. Technical Sergeant Francis Baker survived the war. His crew knocked out 7 confirmed German armored vehicles between July and December 1944, including 3 Panthers, 2 Panzer IVs, and 2 assault guns. Baker attributed their success to training, teamwork, and luck. The 76 gave them a fighting chance, he said in post-war interviews, but it wasn't a miracle weapon. Good tactics beat good equipment every time. Oberstfreiter Klaus Werner also survived, though his war ended at that hedgerow in July. Captured by American forces after abandoning his burning Panther, he spent the remainder of the war in a POW camp. In later interviews, Werner described the shock of encountering American tanks that could penetrate Panthers at range. German intelligence had been catastrophically wrong, he said. The Americans weren't poorly trained. Their equipment wasn't inadequate, and their willingness to adapt and learn made them formidable opponents. The 76mm Sherman wasn't the best tank gun of World War II. British 17-pounders had better penetration. German 88mm guns had superior range and accuracy. But the 76 was good enough, and in combined arms warfare, good enough coupled with tactical excellence proved sufficient. By war's end, American tank crews had learned to fight with whatever tools they possessed, maximizing strengths while minimizing weaknesses. The 76mm gun gave them one more tool. What they did with it demonstrated that in modern warfare, systems defeat platforms, and well-trained soldiers using adequate equipment can defeat superior technology wielded by forces lacking coordination, support, and tactical flexibility. The lessons from Normandy and Ericourt influenced post-war American tank design. The M26 Pershing, entering service in February 1945, mounted a 90mm gun that could defeat any German armor from the front. But only 20 Pershings saw combat before Germany surrendered. The Sherman, both 75 and 76mm variants, fought from D-Day to VE Day as America's primary medium tank. Its success wasn't inevitable. It required constant adaptation, tactical innovation, and crews willing to close with an enemy possessing superior individual platforms. The 76mm gun was part of that adaptation, neither miracle weapon nor inadequate stopgap, but a measured improvement that gave skilled crews the capability they needed when positioned correctly. In the end, that was enough. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.